Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, or good morning, depending on whether you're catching this live or on the replay, or if you're across the globe somewhere, because you do know BGC Book Club is global. So it's your girl, Marcy Thomas, and I am really happy to be here with you again for another episode where we're going to dive into a very hot and steamy, yet educational and mysterious and all the good things. We're getting ready to get into a really, really good, juicy book here that a lot of people were excited about, and actually had people in my DMs talking about, oh, I love this author. So I can't wait to get into it and have a great conversation. So if this is your first time here, welcome. Come on in the room. I am reaching out to you from Atlanta, Georgia, by way of Cleveland, Ohio, my home of birth. And I'm just really excited to be here and connect with readers and lovers of books by, for, and about us from around the world. So tonight I am really excited to talk about sex, lies, and sensibility. Y'all see it? Sex, Lies, and Sensibility. And it is by the wonderful and incomparable Nikki Payne, who by day is a curious tech anthropologist asking the right questions to deliver better digital services. By night, she dreams of ways to subvert canon literature. She's a member of Smut U, a premium feminist writing collective, and a cat lady with no cats. I'm going to have to ask her about that. How can you be a cat lady with no cats? And she's coming to us with this wonderful novel from the outskirts of DMV or DC area. So without any further delay, let's welcome Nikki Payne to BGC Book Club. Welcome.
Hey, y'all. Hey.
Hey. I'm so happy to have you here. You know, I've been following what you've had going on in terms of writing for a while. So it's really excited to finally have an opportunity to really get a chance to talk to you about your latest book. So congratulations and welcome all at the same time.
Thank you, girl. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. So, you know, before we really get into it, this is your second novel, correct?
Uh-huh.
So how does it feel the second time around, as they say?
I felt a little more confident in my voice.
Okay.
I felt much more confident that people were interested in picking up not only the story I was telling, but the way I wanted to tell the story. So
Mm-hmm.
I think the second book is more confident. Like if you like the first one, you may like the second one even more. But also like it's just kind of digging my heels in to say, yeah, this is me. This is how I write, and settle in. Buckle up, sis.
Yeah, buckle up. Yes, and you do definitely take us on a ride in more ways than one, which was really thrilling to read and just to, dive into your way of writing. So, well, first of all, I'm gonna get it out the way. You said you are a cat lady with no cats. Just tell us what that means.
I'm so mad about this. Like I'm just the type of person who just feels like I would really vibe with a cat. You know, like
Mhm.
their attitude, like the way they kind of like really don't care about you, you know? Like they don't really need you and yet
Mhm.
like they're here for the love. I just feel like I would really vibe with that, but I am so allergic. I'm so allergic.
Mm. Okay.
And like I can look at a cat 2 like miles away and just my eyes will swell, nose will swell. It's terrible, but I like the vibe of them. From far away, I'm just like, I'll see you over there, cat.
I see you
I
over
see what
there,
you're putting
minding your
down.
own business.
Yeah, yeah. Just mind, like literally, if mind your business and drink water were a thing, it would be a cat.
Absolutely. So, in terms of your writing career, what was it that led you to really want to start writing? Because, as I've already mentioned, and you told me a little bit beforehand, you are an anthropologist, a tech anthropologist.
Yeah.
So, what was it that drove you to really want to start telling stories?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think that it started for me playing Barbies. Like
Mm.
when I was young, a lot of people think of writing as just like putting pen to paper and just like kind of writing it down. But if you think about it, like the complicated stories that us girls would tell ourselves playing Barbies, the storylines you had to keep in charge of, the scandal, honey, the
Mhm.
scandals.
Mhm.
Okay. I
Right.
mean, it got wild in there, okay? When you didn't have a Ken, G.I. Joe would do, like, it was a whole bunch of shenanigans going down. in my Barbie play. And I realized like through play and through like telling these stories to myself, I got so excited about being a storyteller. I got so excited
Mhm.
being the one who told if something fantastic happened on the way home from school, my brothers and sisters would say like, let Nikki tell it because it's gonna, she's gonna,
Right.
tell it this way. And there's always that uncle or cousin in the family that if something happens, to let them tell it, right? Because there's
Right.
this sense of like the way you structure a story. And so I would say before I even fancied myself a writer, I feel like I was always a storyteller and loved it.
Mm.
Loved the attention of grown-ups when I would, go and tell some wild story and to see their reaction. And it just kind of fed something in me. And yeah, and I started writing even as an anthropologist, just so curious about people and the way they live. I started
Right.
out doing research on whiteness and white proximity in like Black representation. So particularly in the Caribbean, like
Mhm.
nose jobs and skin lightening and hair straightening, like all these
Mhm.
aspects of what it means to be beautiful and what it means to be powerful, and how those things kind of
Mm.
mimic one another, and how that affects the diaspora. So those aspects of beauty, I was just so curious about people telling me a story. And so that's
Right.
what I've always been a storyteller, and I always to this day love to hear them. If you ever meet me, like I will sit you down and you will have to tell me the wildest thing you've ever done because I'm hungry for stories.
I love it. I love it. And you don't shy away from, very deep and as I mentioned even before we came on, there's things you're going to learn. Yes, there's romance and there's a little bit of intrigue as what's going to happen and what's going on behind the scenes, and there's so many things that you wrap up in the story, but at the base of what you're storytelling, you are really doing like a study of characters.
Mm. Yeah, I like to think so. I like to think about like what would happen if this woman who has had all of her agency taken away, who is backed into this corner and really
Mhm.
only has one way out. How is she going to claw her way into success? How is she going to regain her dignity? A part of her
Mhm.
believes that she's not really worthy of love because of her past. This
Mhm.
isn't really a spoiler because it's on the back, but Nora, my character, starts off, she's had a very viral sex tape.
Right.
And it's part of herself that she is constantly trying to tamp down. Someone gives her
Mhm.
one squinty-eyed look and she knows that they know
Mhm.
immediately. She can't escape that part of her life. And so she's constantly trying to reinvent herself or trying to hide her past. And yeah, that character, she needed to heal. But part of her healing was to just recognize that, hey, this is a thing. This is a thing I did. And
Mhm.
now what? Now what?
Right.
You know?
And now what? What's next? What's
Yeah,
next?
exactly.
In thinking of that, it just popped in my mind. Monica Lewinsky.
Yeah, like imagine if you're famous for just like having your ass out, and
Right.
that's the only thing people say they know about you. That's the first thing
Mhm.
people look at you and say that they know exactly who you are, you know?
Mhm. All right, I'm gonna get into it in a second, but another
Yeah.
person I thought of because everybody can't flip it like Kim Kardashian. I'm just saying.
Ah, yeah,
I'm just saying.
exactly. I mean, that's another woman. Mogul started off sex tape. That's the one thing that you still know about Kim, no matter how many millions that she's made afterwards, that it follows you, and particularly if you're a woman, right?
Mhm.
No one's talking about Ray J right now, okay? Ray J is not out in these streets, but Kim
Right.
is.
Right, exactly. So, for those who haven't had a chance to read the book yet, tell us what Sex, Lies, and Sensibility is about.
Yeah, no. So, two sisters, Nora and Yan, find out literally at the worst possible time that they are their father's outside children, and
Mm.
they are disinherited very quickly, and they have to maneuver around this family that does not want them around. And the only thing that they can kind of pry out of the hands of that family is this dilapidated inn in rural coastal Maine. And the first
Mhm.
thing is like, first problem, ain't no black people in Maine. Sis, like, what are we doing?
Right.
Okay. Um, and The second problem is as soon as they pick up and go there is this tall, dark, and handsome indigenous tour guide who says, "Hey, this is my house. What are you doing
Mhm.
here?" So they
Mhm.
got they got to work some stuff out fast.
Absolutely. And that therein lies, the power of the story. Now, we did not mention it, but it is based or inspired, I should say, by Sense and Sensibility. So what is it that in your writing that makes you want to take stories and kind of, that are like historical or classic stories and flip them on their head?
Oh, this is like my favorite question because I I think that there are certain stories, right, that live in what I call like the white imaginary, right? Or just like
Mhm.
the way that people think about like Shakespeare or Jane Austen, like these are these types of stories, right? And there's this aspect of perceived safety, right? In
Mhm.
opening up a book that is, oh, this is Jane Austen. Uh, I'm sure things will be fine, right?
Right.
But it's it's almost like a Trojan horse, right? It's a Trojan
Mhm.
horse of a story, right? And as soon as you crack open that book, you realize a couple of things. It's blackety black, right? Um,
Right.
and there's like nary a trace, right, of those old aspects. And so it's this interesting way to understand a black story. And there's this project of I mean, you've been around books long enough to know that like there's this way that people talk about like black books and books by like people in majority culture. This sense
Right.
that like this white story is universal, right? And this
Mhm.
black story is niche, right? This is
Mhm.
we'll put this in the black interest, section, right?
Right.
But
Right.
what if I told you that black stories are inherently universal as well, right? Because as soon as you decide that this experience is universal and this experience is niche, and I can't possibly understand this experience because I am not of you, like the possibility for empathy is dead and gone, and it
Right.
absolves the majority culture of ever having to grapple with an identity outside of their own experience you know
Mm.
so that's a long way to say it's a Trojan horse, right? And it's an act of like kind of reclamation of the universality of a black story and how you can sit in this woman's like situation and feel immediately that she is you, no matter who you are. Because again, always the argument is about reclamation of humanity. Like we are people too, we're human too. And these feelings that you're feeling as you're reading this character from this beloved, ancient white lady that you love are still
Right.
valid, right?
Right, right. I love that. Thank you for sharing that because I wondered, what made you or what interested you find in kind of flipping these things on their head. So I appreciate that feedback. Now, in this story, you already touched on it. We've got two black girls, black women who are now in Maine. So, in crafting the story, what was it that drew you to want to place these characters in Maine?
Yeah, I mean, Maine is fun because it occupies this space in my mind. And I don't know if this is just all black people, but when I think of Maine, literally the first thing I think of is just ain't no black people there. Do you know what I mean? And it's just like this place of just like kind of devoid of blackness that if you think of the original Sense and Sensibility, when the family marooned these women like off to this place, they weren't just like moving them to another place. Like their marriage prospects were all in their original spot. Like they're essentially exiling these girls
Right,
and changing their ability to gain a husband, which at that time was your only way, your only kind of mode of agency. So your one
right.
choice you can make that can change the prospects of your life. And they
Mm,
they picked these women up and threw them into a place, a new marriage market, all of these things that will make it incredibly hard for them to
mhm.
find a partner to change their lives. She was essentially saying, "You're probably going to be two spinsters forever, right?
Right,
Or
right.
three spinsters if you remember the story." But and I find that like Maine kind of occupies this space for me. Like when I think about how do you exile Black folk, you know what I mean? Um, I think about spaces where, there's actively no community. As far
Right.
as long as Black folk have been in America, we cultivate codes, signals, ways of knowing what places are safe for us, you know?
Hmm.
Green books, right? All of the like there are these silent signals to say like don't go here after sunlight, like don't do this, don't do this. We stay in places that are kind of safe. And so, like, throwing these women into this place in the rural backwoods of the coast of Maine was inherently kind of new, a little bit dangerous, and unsafe potentially for two Black girls. I wanted to put them in this real sense of like, we are out of our league, we are out of our depth.
Hmm. Out of their league and with a task that is insurmountable.
Yeah, yeah. I would argue they were probably set up to fail.
Right. That part.
Mm.
That part. And well, I'm not gonna go there, but sometimes that happens in our lives where we're put into situations where we are set up to fail. And
Hmm.
this is what's happening with these young ladies.
And people can
And
say, well, we tried. We really, I don't know what happened. We really gave it our all.
We
Yeah.
didn't, and then just the whole fact of dealing with, because we talked a little bit about the sex, but there's more sex coming. But the lies, that their whole family background is a lie. So I mean, it's like they're in this place, they're navigating this lie, they
Yeah.
are dealing with the relationships and the fallout, and finding out all of these things. So there is a lot that these young women are dealing with all
Yeah.
at once.
They are. And at the time of the moment where their entire sense of self, their own sense of history is like completely broken, they now have to just pick up and move to a completely different space. And that can be either a blessing or a curse.
It can. It can, because I mean, I guess the blessing of it is that people don't really know you, and you can
Yeah.
reinvent yourself in any way that
Yeah.
you choose to when you step
Yep.
into a new space. But I'm a person, we talked about it earlier. We're both not living where we're originally from, so it's easy to go to a new place, and those folks don't know you.
They don't know me. Right? New phone, who this?
Right. Exactly. 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 But then, of course, as you've already mentioned, they get here and they, go into this home that they're supposed to renovate and try to, make it profitable and all these sorts of things so that they can, you know, get some inheritance and other things like that. But then they
Mhm.
run into Bear and Moxie.
Oh, Bear and Moxie. Oh, Bear.
Bear is something else. And, just to see that. And of course, in order for you to tell Bear's story, because he is a Native American, what was that process like of really understanding that culture? Because as I told you earlier, I didn't really know, much about the culture and like Native Americans or indigenous peoples that would be in Maine and, on their lifestyles.
Yeah. No, I mentioned before, like I'm a cultural anthropologist, and part of the types of stories that I love to tell are just like Black women encountering the world, right? Black women encountering a world that they had never known before, and um, and that was true for me as well. I grew up in Houston, Texas, and it's largely urban, and while
Mhm.
it's an incredibly diverse city, and I grew up in this bubble of just every single culture imaginable. I've never really had like many experiences with indigenous folk, and so this was a subjectivity that I wanted to take on, but I also didn't want to phone it in. I didn't want to guess. I didn't want to Google, right? I felt
Right.
like I had to be there, and
Mm.
so I took myself up and I went to Maine and made a few connections with some academics out in Orono and built some relationships and came to visit. And I got to sit and sit on like council meetings, 4-hour council meetings on like
Wow.
salmon, right? And just kind of be a fly on the wall, not try to put anything into the story. And this was also, it was a conversation. It wasn't just me saying, oh, that's good to put in my book. That's good. Like there are some instances where some folks push back, like, I don't know if that's really your story to tell. And I was like, say less.
Mm.
You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? So like it
Fair.
wasn't, yeah, no, exactly. And so because there's a long history, right, of people kind of copying indigenous like identity without having to, live on the reservation or kind of live that life, right? So I make this joke also with when Yan and Moxie were, kind of getting a little close. Yan tries to connect with her by telling her about everybody's ancient Cherokee grandmother, great
Right,
grandmother.
right.
You
We all
know,
got some Cherokee in us.
we all got everybody's Cherokee, and just imagine like these like actual indigenous folks like hearing that from everybody, and it's like, can every
Mhm.
like statistically, can it be everybody? Do you know what I mean? No, no, right? And so like that aspect of the culture, I didn't want to phone in. I didn't want to fake, because I felt like Black folk and Native folk are the two oldest subcultures in America. Um,
Right.
and we had stuff to say to each other without white folk in the room. You know what I mean? And it's a complex relationship, I think, that I don't see a lot in romance. I actually don't see a lot in like modern literature either, right? It's always like kind of black speaking back to the mainstream culture, right? But what happens when like these subcultures are speaking to each other, right? That's sometimes
Mhm.
also the work of white supremacy, is to imagine that there's only one other, right? To actually speak back to. But what if we kind of spoke with each other, and what does that look like?
And I love that because I'm thinking, even I'll have to go ask my mother about it again, but I remember her saying that, she's from South Georgia, Southeast Georgia, that there is someone native in our family history on her side.
It's
And there
everybody,
definitely,
sis.
yeah, on my
Every,
father's side as well. So I mean, there were definitely connections and things like that. And no, everybody wasn't necessarily Cherokee, but a lot
yeah,
but a lot of us do have indigenous,
yeah,
roots within us, just because of the times and kind of how people were put into these boxes, so to
yeah,
speak. So
yeah,
it's not that it's not possible, but everybody is
yeah.
not wanting the same.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely, absolutely. And so I just felt like it was really ripe for some sort of exploration, and also like if you can allow me to get just a little nerdy.
Please do.
Okay, so like I also feel like Black folk and Native folk have this interesting like relationship to the present or like modernity, because like if you think about Native folk, you really only see them in like their traditional garb. Maybe when I was growing up, there was this commercial in Texas, like when you threw a piece of litter out on the highway, there's this Native American person who would be transposed on the screen, and he'd have like this one tear, right? So they're
Mm,
all like their relationship, they're associated with like the American past, right? And
mhm.
but conversely though, when in the imaginary of like the American past or the good old days and nostalgia, like Black folk aren't there, right? So like if you
Right.
think of like make America great again and hashtag not my Ariel, right? Everyone wants to think back to a time free of blackness. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
like if you think about one of the things that a lot of folks in my research with the Native community said, they're like, we're here now. We're not a
Right.
relic from the past. We're not a street name. We are not a river name. We are here now. We are people, and we also like demand rights and like tribal sovereignty. And if you pretend like we're all in the past, it's a way to ignore what the needs are now, right?
Mhm,
And for Black
mhm.
folk, like this notion of like them never having any history, being constantly modern. Because if you put Black folks in Bridgerton, that's historically inaccurate. They were, what's going on? Like people get
Mhm.
in their chest because they don't want their past muddled up, right, with
Right.
notions of what they consider to be the modern problem. And so all of this to say, I feel like Black folk and Native folk have this really interesting relationship with time, right? And how they're
Mm.
perceived and how they're allowed to be perceived, and like putting this Black woman in this rural context, putting this Native man in this thoroughly modern context. I was just trying to do something.
Right, absolutely. And Geraldine, the book is Sex, Lies, and Sensibility. That's the book that we are talking about. But yes, it's just seeing that, and just wherein there are things that are different, there are things that are very much the same, just as human
Yeah,
beings living life and dealing with things in the world, like and we talked about this beforehand as well, and you talk about it in the book, in encounters with law enforcement. And there was an interesting fact that you found out. We see it in the book where it happens a few times where they're kind of being watched, but there is something to this in the indigenous communities.
Yeah. Right. No, absolutely. It's one of some of the most interesting aspect of research were not just the divergences of just like how these cultures were different, but these interesting, compelling, and even kind of sinister ways that they were similar. So, like, if you look up the data on just like per capita and like the percentages also of like native violence or violence against native folks by police, you'll find that it's actually the number one instances, right, of violence against a particular group are native folks. And so when you think about like societies and areas and places that are overly policed, overly watched, right, like they're having those same struggles with what it means to be overly policed, what it means to be overly surveilled, and like what it means to for their lives not to matter, right? Missing Native women, right? When a Native woman or Black girl goes missing, right? The outcry, the screams to find them, right? They're quiet, right? It's muffled, right? Whose body matters, right? Sojourner Truth asks, "Ain't I a woman?" Right?
Right.
Whose disappearance, whose violence against them? When does that matter, right? But also these really compelling aspects of just like for me, it was this really sweet notion of hair and hair care and
Mhm.
hair braiding that I
Mhm.
found these just lovely convergences in. Um, for the Black community, like sitting down, like at someone's kitchen table or between your mother's legs to get your hair braided can be such a intimate sign of care for someone.
Yeah.
It can be such a slow and loving moment to slow down and just kind of take care of someone, be in charge of how they look and how they're perceived in the world. So, like sitting down and asking someone to braid your hair isn't a small thing, right?
Right.
And also that's extremely important in the Native community, right?
Yes.
Your hair is attached to who you are, your spirit, right? And it's an extension of yourself. And so you cannot let everybody in your head, braid in your head, especially if you don't know what their thoughts are, their intentions are, because
Mhm.
that's you. And so to trust someone to sit down and have them braid your hair, it meant something for both of them, you know?
Mm.
And so that was like this interesting convergence there.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Now, just in the story in general, because it is romance, there is a romance,
Mm,
a lot of romance, but
sis.
it's like one of those will they, won't they? But we know that they probably ultimately will.
I mean, it's a romance.
It's a romance. So,
Like they get it
but
in, but I'm gonna torture you. I'm gonna make it hurt. Okay.
yeah, yeah. Because it was like, okay, at what point? Okay, at what point? Yes, I'm reading. Like, when are we gonna? Because of course we know, you've already mentioned it that, Nora is dealing with this whole thing of this shame and, being seen in a certain way when people realize who she is and, really struggling with that. So she's dealing with that and she meets Bear and he does recognize her, but not
Yes.
for the reason that she's thinking he's
Yeah.
going to recognize her.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, what does that do to your psyche a little bit for
Right.
someone to recognize you? Yes, for your body, but for the good your body did, right? For how like amazing it was and
Mm.
how like shooketh, how good you
Mhm.
were,
Mm.
like literally that like aspect of the way he saw her first. I just think it
Mm.
stayed with her. It stayed with her, you know? Like this
Uh,
man remembers who I was. I mean, I
mhm.
think he brought her back to life.
Absolutely. And that's something because we all want to be seen. We
Yeah.
all want to be seen, and we don't want to be seen or recognized for the worst thing that we did
Yeah. Yeah.
or perceived worst thing that we did, put it that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
So I love that, that, and it also gave them place of commonality, a jumping
Yeah.
off point to even though there was an attraction, it gave them
Mhm.
an opportunity to have a jumping off point of to be able to really build a relationship, because
Yeah.
oftentimes, in real life and in romance novels or books,
Mhm.
it's all about the physicality, or it's all about this attraction. But it's
Yeah.
good to see people kind of get to know one another in a
Yeah.
different way,
Yeah.
and have it not always be about that, even though we love to read it. I enjoyed
Oh,
reading it.
oh, baby. Yeah.
But it's nice to be able to see people formulate real relationships. So, in telling the story, how important was it for you to make them have something beyond just a physical attraction?
Yeah. No, it was so important because you need to one of the reasons why I love romance is that you have to convince these readers that these people are actually quite deeply in love. And
Right.
love and like horror and fear, like those are those like lizard brain emotions, you know? And like those emotions that are like kind of guttural and primal to us. And it's hard to
Mhm.
fake. It's hard to pretend it. And you'll feel it when the author didn't kind of get it right, when you
Right.
believe that they definitely want to bone, but you don't believe that they are deeply, deeply in love with each other. And
Right.
one of the things that I love to do is find ways for these characters to naturally connect. They're both athletes. And
Mhm.
so that was a huge part of their connection. But also, they were both so connected to um, and compelled by this sense of duty, by
Yes.
what they had to be to other people, and that
Yes.
even more than their like athleticism. As painful as some of the decisions that both of them made were, they always they always respected that core sense of like, I know exactly why he is doing this thing, you know?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
um and that was one of the reasons why even when the pain came, I think Nora understood it, because she
Right.
she respected the hell out of that aspect of him because she knew him.
Right, and that is something, that sense of duty, and it can be good and it can be not so good in some
Mhm.
instances, when a person has to deny their true self, when they have to
Yep.
deny their true desires, things like that, all from a sense of duty. But how
Yeah.
many of us actually fall into that? I'm thinking as
Oh.
Black women. How many
Oh,
times do we, because of a sense of duty,
yeah.
that we
Like,
don't, yeah.
no, you're absolutely right. Like, the reason why a lot of women actually empathized with Bear's character is like that sense of like going against your own needs for
Mhm.
other people, saying yes when you know you should have said no, saying you can do it when you know you probably cannot add that to your schedule because you don't want to be seen as weak. You don't want to be seen as not having your shit together. You don't want to be seen as not on top of things. So you just cover and cover and cover until you're in over your head. And um, I personally have done that myself. And so like
Mhm.
when I saw this character who was who was susceptible to that. I definitely I identify with him because I've I've done it. I've been there. And I've been there also in the place of trying to hide that I didn't have my shit together, you know?
Right, right. No, you just said something when you saw this in your character. So, what is this a thing where you already know what's going to happen, where it's going when you sit down to write, or do the characters kind of speak to you as you flesh out their story?
Oh, it's a
Or
little bit of both. Like I'm always trying to like be like going back to like playing Barbies. I'm always trying to like force them into scenarios. You know what I mean? And
mm,
for the most part, I feel mostly successful. But there are instances where my characters like push back, where they're just like, "This is weird," or "I don't want to do this."
right.
And sometimes like I'll listen to them and like follow their path through and see if the story is better.
Hmm.
Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not, and I'm just like, "Sorry, I know it sucks, but you're gonna have to take your medicine,"
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so, like, sometimes the story is in front of you, and you're just like, okay, I got to hit these beats. I know this, but there are these instances where the characters push back, or they resist, or they take
Mhm.
forever, to do something. I mean, if you're talking about at what point, it's because those characters, Bear and Nora, I had built them so obsessed with doing the right thing,
Right.
so inside of their own heads about how other people saw them, that it wouldn't make sense that they would just go, F it all,
Mhm.
I'm just gonna run into your arms. Like it just could kept it kept falling apart after that. And sometimes you just have to listen to those characters about when is the right time.
And it definitely was a good time and the right time. Now, of course, there are a lot of lies being told though
Oh
as
yeah.
well.
Oh yeah.
It's
Oh yeah.
all sex lies and sensibility, and
Oh yeah.
sometimes it's not
Yeah.
necessarily the lie where you're actually telling the person the lie. It's the lie of omission. You're not
That
giving
you're
someone
holding back. Oh yeah.
not giving someone all of the information.
Oh yeah.
And that happens a lot in real world situations where people, oh, I'm just not going to tell you that. But matter
Yeah.
of fact, a friend of mine and I were talking about this earlier today because she said she saw some party that was talking about a friends with benefits party. And she's like, what is
Hmm.
this? I'm like, it's a party for people looking with friends with benefits. That's what it
Hmm.
is.
Yeah.
And the whole thing of it is, well, at least when you go
Yeah.
into it, you're not going into a situation where you're thinking it's going to be one thing and it ends up being something else.
Yeah.
So, but with that in mind, it's sometimes people don't want to tell the truth about where they are or what's going
Yep.
on because they're afraid of losing.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I think Bear is one of those characters. Like Bear is not a just absolutely perfect, ideal romantic hero. He is not without flaws. Um, but I did try my best to make him a real man. Uh,
Yes.
a real man that still loves the mess out of that woman. And
Mm-hmm.
what are you gonna do with that? You know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's something to see. Another thing that comes up in the book is finances.
Oh,
People dealing with
honey,
financial issues, the
get
people,
into
the
it.
have-nots, the moving it around, the figuring out where it's supposed to go. So, just in doing that, that definitely brings up another element to the story because in this particular case, Nora and her sister are seen as having a little something, something. You
Hmm.
know, are looking at them and perhaps judging them as Black women who maybe have a little bit more than what they have.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, honestly, one thing about Jane Austen, when you open up any Jane Austen book, she's gonna tell you exactly who got the bag and who don't. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
So like
mhm,
the the aspects of like what it takes for a woman to be happy, to have agency, Jane Austen is very, very clear that a lot of that is tied to her economic situation. And so she
mhm,
oftentimes puts women in situations where they are um, poor, or they are in this place where they're in dire straits. And so she builds these economic arguments to talk about like these proto feminist arguments about who owns money, who owns land, right?
mhm,
So I don't think you can adapt a Jane Austen without looking into these economic aspects, Like Bear is eating fried bologna sandwiches. He's
right,
trying to get his business on the level, and he sees Nora, oh, this is, she got bread. This is an opportunity,
right,
Let me build my business up. So there's
mm,
this stark difference between how he sees her and how she sees herself. She does not
mhm,
see herself as a wealthy woman, right?
right,
And that's the thing that's, like, interesting about the way she's characterized is that she'll dress in clothes that are just her clothes. And
mhm,
there's a scene when she's, coming to the school, and all the kids are making fun of what she has on. Like,
mhm.
it's, like everything is designer. And it's this moment where she's looking down like, "Oh, is this" you
This is
know,
my clothes.
these are
Right,
just clothes, right? But, like,
right,
if you've ever spoken to someone who's like upper middle class, they don't like sit around and like think they're incredibly wealthy people, right?
Right.
They're just like, okay, I'm just kind of living my life. But the difference between how she sees herself and how Bear sees her is there's a mile difference that he thinks that she is, her feet have never touched the ground in a way. Even she even has a job that's just a spite job. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
she just works there to spite someone who, said that she couldn't do anything without him, right? So like
Right.
she didn't even need the job. It was just like, I'm going to show you that I'm, able to be something in the world. And so she does come from a different sense of like what poor actually is, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now we have not talked about Yan, but I love her character as well. I have to
And
bring
is
her
my
up.
friend.
Yes, because Nora's sister, she is just like a free spirit in some ways, but then we also see her vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the interesting aspects about Yan is that she lives kind of in every moment. She's in love all the time. She's falling
Mhm.
out with love all the time. Um, she probably, because of her sickness, Yan has sickle cells, and
Yes.
that's found out. That's pretty early in the book that she has sickle cell anemia, and um, one of the aspects of that is like, hey, we're not going to be here, you know, living our life just I'm not going to live here just to wait for the next pain crisis or to sit and wait for everything to come crashing down. Like for her it's just like you got to grab life by the fat of its stomach. So she
Mhm.
fundamentally doesn't understand Nora and her need to like manage her life that way. She's like, look, ain't everything gonna be here all the time,
Right.
so you gotta
Right.
you gotta bite that sandwich now, you know.
Right.
um
Exactly.
and also just like putting her in this place where she has this disease that a lot of people of African descent share, and also putting her in Maine is also this added
Yes.
aspect of
Yes.
uncertainty of like,
Yes.
what happens when she gets sick? Can she just go to any place and get treated? No, actually. And how does that complicate the way they have to live their life? Um,
Mm.
or like being in Maine.
Yeah, that is something because, oftentimes, and in this space, we have talked to physicians and, other people who may be dealing with chronic illnesses, and they talk about that the treatment of when you go to
Yeah.
the doctor or the hospital. So I love the fact that, once again, it's romance and it's all these other things, but that's a very serious issue and something to think about. You can be in spaces where it is predominantly Black, or there are more Black people, but there aren't a lot of necessarily Black physicians or people who are culturally competent.
Right.
But then you take yourself outside of it totally. They like, I don't even know what this is. I heard of this before, but what am I supposed
Yep.
to do with you?
Yep. Exactly. I mean, literally, what am I supposed to do with this? Yeah.
Mhm,
And so it
mhm.
adds this added element of stakes to whatever they do. Like can these women afford to fail in this space? And I think in the end, I want the reader to know that they cannot afford to fail.
Right, right. Which is often the time with us, we can't afford to fail. We have to find our
You get one
way.
shot.
We have to make our way.
Yep. No, you're
Now,
exactly right.
of course, we're going to get into the romance part. Now, I just have there are sex scenes, so for those of you who are sensitive, well, the book is called Sex, Lies, and Sensibility. So, I mean, you kind of have to,
Yeah. Yeah.
it
It's in
is
the
what
title,
it is.
sis.
It's in the title. Oh yeah, don't be alarmed. They are steamy sex scenes,
Hmm.
and but even within them, they're not done in a way that feels, what should I say, scene, per
Yeah.
se. But it's tasteful because these are people, they have developed a relationship, they love each other, and they are just exploring what that means in the context of
Oh, wait.
relationship.
Oh, boy, are
Oh,
they exploring.
they are exploring. Yes, they are. Now, for you as a writer, do you find it difficult to craft those types of scenes, or do they come relatively easily to you?
I definitely have to get into a like a mental space. Like I
Mhm.
can't like, oh, the kids need like their science fair project reworked and the car broke down and then I'm like going here and like, oh, let me write the sex scene. Like it doesn't work like that. I literally have to get into a space. Like, let me listen to like some Boys to Men,
Right.
let me light a
Mhm.
candle, let me catch a vibe, you know? And
Mhm.
if you can create an atmosphere that feels sultry and feels exactly how you want it to feel, it's easier to slip into the head of the characters. Music can do that for me very quickly also. So like playing something that gives me that feeling and then just trying to slip into the feeling of like, what is this person feeling right now? Are they more nervous? Are they more excited? What's happening? What are they trying to do? Because sex scenes, which I love, there are when you think about characterization and like character studies, there are very few instances that show who someone is like honestly at their core than a sex
Right.
scene, right? Who is this person ultimately? Are they greedy? Are they selfish? Are they giving? Are they kind? Are they like fundamentally? I think a sex scene is another opportunity to see this side of a character, like who they are at their core. When they are like just trying to get maximize their own pleasure, or are they
Mhm.
going to focus on giving someone else pleasure? Are they going to focus on, are they going to be too obsessed with their own body, too inside their own head? Like it's so much characterization that can happen in a sex scene that oftentimes we treat it as this like dirty thing that is gratuitous, but it's just such an opportunity to learn who your character is at their core. Bear, generous man. You know what I
Right.
mean? you
He's just
know, generous, given to the core, ain't he?
yes.
Yeah,
That's who he is. But I
yeah,
love that you just said that though, because it's not porn where it's just a walk in the room like, hey, hey,
yeah, yeah,
let's go at it.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Got a
So
pizza to deliver. Yeah,
right, exactly. So I love that, what you just said, that it is a chance to kind of see because there are, so many, we're all grown-ups here. There
yeah,
are a lot of emotions and things that are going on in the back of your mind or the front of your
yeah,
mind, for men and for women. So I
absolutely.
love the fact that, you're saying that you do that and tell that those parts of the book with a level of really sensitivity and also thinking about who those characters are. So
Yeah. I
I
mean,
love
there's
that.
this there's this particular scene that's been causing a stir on on social media where the characters don't even really touch, right?
Right.
And it's a moment, however, um, for these characters to truly come, like for Nora to come into herself and say, "Hey, I did this thing, but you know what?
Mm,
I'm still worthy of like enjoying myself physically, and
right.
um, I have to own this part of myself."
Mm,
And now what? But that scene was incredibly steamy, but it also
mm,
did that work of moving her out of the shame cycle that she was in, right? So
mm.
it's not like these throwaway scenes that are just for the feels. That was a
Right.
moment for her to see herself the way Bear saw her, which is incredibly
Right.
powerful.
It is. It is. And the fact that you said the way he saw her, because it was something, and you've already mentioned it, so it's not, anything that's hidden. But, she had been in a situation where this sex scene or this sex tape was made and, people use it as a way to shame her.
Mhm.
And he did the opposite. He's like, okay, we're gonna take what happened to you and we're gonna flip it on his head. Well,
We're
her
gonna
sister
flip it.
helped her start to think about it as well,
Yeah,
but he really, in an intimate space, he
yeah,
helped her to like flip that on his head and be like, I don't really care about that with that person. I
yeah,
want to know about you and who you are and what you feel and
yeah,
what is pleasurable to you or what you enjoy. So that was
yeah,
good as well. We don't
yeah,
oftentimes see that or think of men in that way.
yeah.
Or
I
they don't
mean,
act that way
she
oftentimes.
needed,
So
yeah, she needed to reframe that situation in her
mhm,
head, and that was this
mhm,
incredible moment for her to reframe the story and stop imagining that this was this other man's story of her. You know?
mhm. And that was so good. So, of course, a lot of we don't tell what happens, so y'all got to
Sure.
read it if you haven't already. But
Sure.
of course, there are things with Bear that come to light that there always has to be that thing that kind of
Yep.
like moves everything out of whack, and you wonder like what's gonna happen. That's
The
just
other
that.
shoe.
Yeah, it's always something when you think things are going really, really good. And I'm like, okay, they're finally. I mean, that's just the nature of storytelling. That there has to be something to kind of throw a monkey wrench in there.
Yeah.
So of course, that happens, and there are things where they kind of have to work through and sort through that and find their way and make a lot of decisions.
Mhm.
So just I'm not gonna get into it because we don't want to tell too much. But in coming up with what things are going to kind of throw them off kilter, is that an easy part of the process, or you kind of know that as you're writing beforehand, or does it take you by surprise as well?
It's hard. It's hard because fundamentally you want these people to work out, like you want them to win. You want them to see that this other person is good for them. Um,
Mhm,
and and all of that. But one of the great things about crafting those moments of like kind of relationship crisis is that the reader also has to see how these people ride out
mhm,
a storm and
mhm,
how they come together, like what happens. Like in the end, like when you close that book, you want to see, like you want to believe that these people are rock solid. Like
mm,
Gibraltar will fall before Nora and Bear
right.
fall. You know what I mean? And like you want to feel that they have it together, that they have the tools to
Mhm,
navigate really complex situations. And I think they had a complex situation that it was hard for them, for either one of them to come out as a winner if they would have chosen the easy route.
mm,
If either one of them would have made the easy decision, it would have been fast and fun and ultimately temporary.
right.
And I don't think either of them wanted that.
Right.
I don't think either of them wanted that. And so they had to do it the hard way. And their love and their happily ever after was hard fought. And I think it tested the metal of their relationship. And I pressed the end knowing that those two were gonna be like 89 years old, still,
Mhm, mhm,
kissing somewhere. You know what I mean? Like
mhm.
I felt like they had the tools to weather a long-term relationship.
Right, to be couple goals, as people like to
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
Yes, and I mean that is something because a lot of people may look at and think romance is just supposed to be easy, and we know in real life it's not. There are always going to be tensions. There are always going to be things that come up. There are going to be things that you have to fight through and navigate. There are going to be people who are naysayers about your relationship,
Oh, yeah.
and you have to make decisions along those lines. It's just so much.
Yeah,
But at the core of the two of them, as you've been saying all along, the way these characters are crafted, they are loving people, they are lovable people. They have had this desire for partnership and something
yeah,
that has been denied to them for a variety of reasons. Some external things, some internal things.
yeah,
So to
yeah,
be able to see them get to a space where they are
yeah.
open to love and open to being in relationship
Right.
is it's quite a powerful
No, I love the way you say that because I feel like my larger project just as a romance author is like, what does it look like to make sure that like Black women have this soft place to land? What does it mean to say that you can make mistakes? You can be in a sex tape. You can be seen as ratchet, dirty, ghetto, all of these things that they put on Black women's bodies, um, and still deserve love and still deserve
thing.
a happy ending. That you don't have to be um, it doesn't have to be Black respectability politics that only the best deserve the happiness. That the boss, the CEO, the woman who has it all together, who's doing it all, hashtag strong Black woman, is chosen because she is the best. Like, what if you are you and have
Right.
made mistakes and are in the trenches and you still deserve love? Right? Same
Mm,
with Bear. Like, what if he starts out, not at the top? What if he's not the CEO? What if he is robbing Peter to pay Paul? What if he's
Right.
has this hero edit in a community that he doesn't deserve? Does he still get to be loved at the end, to be cradled in like somebody's arms? And my argument is like, yes, you still get it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And that's really powerful. So believe it or not, we are at time. Can you believe that?
How dare? How dare?
How dare it? How dare we be at time? But I want to ask you, Nikki, I know the book has been out since February and you have been
Mhm.
on the go, going to events, doing things like this. Are
Yeah.
there any particular places or spaces where people can be on the lookout for you in the coming weeks?
Ooh, in the coming weeks, I'm gonna be in Virginia at One More Page Books. I'm also gonna be at Comic-Con in the romance panel. We're gonna be talking about retellings. I'm gonna be at Steamy Lit. Oh, Steamy Lit. It's one of the best book cons for like authors and readers of color. It is just fantastic. It's such a fun time. And I can't wait to meet readers and find new readers.
Well, that sounds good. Well, just real quick, a lot of people have read your other book, Pride and Protest.
Mhm.
So, for those who have not, just a little bit of snippet about that, just so people can get both the books, not just the
Oh,
one. We want to read everything.
yes. Okay. Again, for our Black Jane Austen girlies, this is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, and this is an enemies to lovers tale about a Black woman who is living with her mother in DC and is so tired of the gentrification happening in her neighborhood, and she decides to stage this big protest, and she's gonna do it all. She's making a sign, she's doing everything, and right at this big event she probably should have done more research because when she gets there, there is this very handsome Asian man who she thinks is part of her community. And she's like, look, bet, here's what we're doing to these folks. We about to stun on them. And she tells him her entire plan to ruin this company, not knowing that he's a CEO of that company.
Oh, no.
And she walks in, she's all like, this is about to slay, and he burns her signs. And that's
Mm.
where the story starts, and it's nothing but trouble. Nothing but trouble, hot trouble, you know?
All right, so y'all heard it here. If you haven't read that one as well, go ahead and please grab both of Nikki's books. And I know there is more to come because you
Oh yeah.
are a brilliant writer, a brilliant author, and we just really look forward to seeing more and more. And you know that you always have a space to come back here and talk about the work that you have going on.
I would love
Yes,
to.
this is your home now.
I'm excited.
Yes. I really look forward to being able to see you again. So thank you for everyone who's watching live. I really see there are quite a few people in the room, so that's good to see. And if you came in later, or if you want to, share it out or rewatch, please do so. Of course, you can do that on YouTube and as well as on Facebook, and it's actually on X Twitter. It's all X/Twitter is going to all these places at the same time. So please feel free to watch and share and rewatch. And you can go to the Brown Girl Collective bookstore to find copies of Nikki's books that are available for you there for purchase, or your favorite local independent bookstore or Black-owned bookstore, because we want to support our people as much as we possibly can. So Nikki, thank you again. I'm going to let you off the screen, but hold on for me for 1 second, and so I can say a proper goodbye. But thanks again so much for a wonderful conversation. Congratulations again on your wonderful and powerful work, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future. So hold on for
Thank
me
you
for
so
1 second.
much.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. All right, that was exciting for me to read the book, and as I say, it's steamy, y'all. I'm like, woo, okay. So I invite you to pick up a copy of Sex, Lies, and Sensibility and really get into Nikki's work. And just like I did, you'll learn some things as well in the reading. So I really hope that you will have an opportunity to do so. Oh yes, thank you, Geraldine. We want she's ordering the book, looking forward to reading. So all right, Nikki, that's another sale for you. But for next week, we are actually going international again. As I mentioned at the top of this hour that I do interview authors from around the globe. So next week we will have another. It's Onyi Nora Banili. I'll get it right before she comes on. But her book is Allow Me to Introduce Myself, which will actually be released at the end of May, but we are going to be talking to her next week. So I look forward to that conversation with our international sister, who a Nigerian British sister. So looking forward to her story and seeing you all here again for another episode of BGC Book Club. So until then, you all have a great week. Keep reading. Keep enjoying books by, for, about us. And I look forward to seeing you again real soon. Take good care. Bye-bye.